Good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is Dr. Ferrer, your professor. Good morning, class. Our topic for this morning is on the first world and third world countries. There are three classifications of countries. One is the first world countries, or also called developed countries. The concept of the first world countries originated during the Cold War and comprising countries that were aligned with the NATO and the United States, and of course opposed to the Soviet Union and or communism during the Cold War. These are also a small group of rich industrialized countries such as the United States of America, you have Canada, you have France, Italy, and the United Kingdom. Then we have the second world countries. This refers to the former communist countries of Eastern Europe and the USSR. This is also called the communist bloc. These countries are called transitional economies, including Soviet Union, China, Cuba, and their friends. And the third is the third world countries. These are remaining nations which aligned with neither the first world countries or the second world countries. Sometimes they are referred to as developing or least developed countries. They are a large group of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America which have lower incomes than the first world countries. Now, our focus will be on the third world countries. The third world countries is being divided into 5. One is the fourth world countries. These are parts of countries in the third world that are most stricken by poverty, and most of these regions do not have political ties. They are also considered as poorest countries with low income or least developed countries. In Asia, these fourth world countries includes Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Burma, Cambodia, East Timor, Laos, and Maldives. The second are called middle-income countries. These are countries whose economies are with gross national income per capita between $1,026 to $12,475. Middle-income economies are one of the income categories that the World Bank uses to classify economies for operational and analytical purposes. Then we have emerging economies. These are fast-growing middle-income countries, or they are emerging to take place among the developed countries of the world. The economy of developing nations that is becoming more engaged with global market as it grows. Example of these countries are Argentina, Brazil, India, Indonesia, South Korea, Poland, Egypt, Iran, Nigeria, Pakistan, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Taiwan, Mexico, Malaysia, and Thailand. Then we have the next, or the newly industrialized countries. They are developing economies that have advanced towards industrialization and might become developed in the near future. This includes South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, which their economies have a strong Western-style industrialized base. Added to these countries are China, India, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, of course, South Africa, Turkey, Brazil, and Mexico. And the last is the BRIC countries, that is an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, and China, which are forecasted that by 2050, there will be 4 of the most dominant economies in the world. They are deemed to be developing countries at a similar stage of newly advanced economic development on their way to becoming developed countries. Now let's have some of the problems in the third world countries. First is the per capita income. Per capita income, or other called it average income. This measures the average income earned per person in a given area in a specified year. It is calculated by dividing the area's total income by its total population. Third world countries have lower per capita income. 84% of the world's population live in the third world in 2006, yet the total gross national product of the third world is only 22%, while first world, with 16% of the population, enjoys 78% of the world's gross national product. Another problem is on the physical capital. This consists of tangible, man-made objects that a company buys or invests and uses to produce goods. Third world countries have far less physical capital per capita than first world countries. They are poor in infrastructure as weak in physical capital. So a country tends to be less developed. The fewer the number of telephone main lines per person, the lower the percentage of roads that are paved, the fewer the percentage of the population with access to improved sanitation facilities. So the absence or the lack of this physical capital hampers the economic development of a certain country. Third world countries have less agricultural land irrigated and the less ability it has to generate electricity. So, as I said earlier, physical capital is important because the more physical capital, the greater the productive potential of the economy. Another problem is human capital. Human capital, or economic value of the abilities and qualities of labor that influence productivity. This includes higher education, health, and the like. The result is greater output for the economy and higher income for the individual if human capital is high. Developing countries, of course, have lower levels of human capital than developed countries, such as the percentage of enrollment on different stages of education is quite lower. Less developed countries would expect to have the lowest proportions of the total age group enrolled in education. Recently, there has been growing interest in female education. In developing countries, females are less likely to receive formal education than males. However, it is argued that the rate of return on educating females is higher than males. such that a woman who can read and write is far more likely to pass on these skills to her children and grandchildren than a man. Next problem is high population growth. Third world countries have had relatively high rates of population growth compared to first world countries. In the case of the Philippines, the country is experiencing rapid population growth. The rate of natural increase, that is the birth rate minus death rate, is 2.2% in the Philippines, compared with 0.8% in Thailand, 1.9% in Singapore, and 10% in Malaysia. So countries with high population growth has two problems. One is they need to invest large amounts in both physical and human capital to create goods and services and jobs, of course. It means they have to forego some consumption and invest more, but possible as high population means more consumption. High population growth, of course, brings high dependency ratios. The more the population is increasing, the more the dependents are in a particular country. Then we have health and mortality or death. Third world countries on average enjoy poorer health and are likely to die younger than those in the first world countries' people. Poor health and high mortality is caused by several factors. When we say mortality rate or mortality rate is the number of deaths due to a disease divided by the total population. So, the standard of nutrition of individuals is one of the factors. Poor nutrition is a major contributor to ill health and high mortality rates. And poor nutrition also affects both the physical and mental development of individuals. And it also affects educational performance of kids, especially. So as you can see on the slide, the comparison between nutrition in third world countries and that of nutrition in the first world countries. You can see kids or children suffering from poor nutrition, while in the other part of the world, among the first world countries, they have several nutritious foods to take, unlike in the third world countries. Then another problem is the physical infrastructure of the country. When we say infrastructure, these are, of course, basic facilities and installations that help a government or a community run, including roads, schools, phone lines, sewage treatment plants, and power generation. So, among the third world countries, as far as physical infrastructure is concerned, there are problems as to access to clean water, which is of course vital for health, access for clean environment, which is also vital for health. Then large number of people die from waterborne diseases and/or diseases carried by animals such as malaria. We have that in Palawan. And while in the first world, these diseases have been eliminated through proper infrastructure or control of the natural environment. So just look at the pictures included on the slide, the infrastructure found in third world countries and those found in the first world countries. So you can see there's slums and some in areas in the third world. Same thing, same infrastructure that can be found in our country. Another one is the working environment. These are all the surroundings when we are working. So in third world countries, people often are forced to work in poor conditions, which severely damage their health. Many of them start work at a much younger age than those in the first world countries. So the same thing also is happening in the Philippines, where kids or young people have started working at an early age or younger age. Then another problem is on health care. This means maintenance or the improvement of health via the prevention, diagnosis, treatment, recovery, or cure of diseases, illness or injury, and other physical or mental impairment of the people. So, among the third world countries, of course, healthcare provision is poor. While low and middle income countries tend to have less health staff relative to their population than high income countries. And that is also true in the Philippines. We have your direct observation as we face the recent or the current pandemic in the country, where the government is really trying its best to flatten the curve, yet until so far no vaccine is being invented or being produced to combat this pandemic. Then another problem is on unemployment and underemployment. So first we have to differentiate these two terms. When we say unemployment, this is when someone who could work and wants to work but is unable to find a suitable job. While when we speak of underemployment, this is when a person does not work full-time or to take a job does not reflect their actual training and financial needs. So in the case of third world countries, they tend to have much higher unemployment and underemployment than the first world countries. Of course, there are reasons regarding these problems, and you can consider lack of physical capital, or meaning without the machines, factories, and offices, workers are structurally unemployed. And another one is in countries heavily reliant on agriculture. Of course, unemployment is highly seasonal, and that also happens in our very own country. Now let's proceed with the structure of the economy. This describes the changing balance of output, trade, and incomes and employment drawn from different economic sectors, such as you have primary, secondary, and tertiary. Of course, growth and development alters the structure of output and the economy. Developed countries have gradually shifted from primary to secondary and then to tertiary production over time. So when we speak of the primary sector, this includes the extraction or the harvest of products from the earth, such as that of raw materials and basic food. And the activities includes, of course, farming, fishing, mining, forestry, hunting, and the like. While when we speak of the secondary sector, this describes the role of manufacturing. It encompasses the industries which produce finished and usable products, or those that involve in construction, while tertiary sector is also known as the service sector. This consists of the production of services instead of end products, such as tourism, banking, software, and the like. As you can see on the slide, as to the distribution of the gross domestic product of these countries, 3 from the third world and 3 from the first world, those that are heavily dependent on agriculture and industry are those countries from the third world, while the 3 from the first world are more service-oriented and seconded by the industry sector. Agriculture is no longer their concern, unlike in the third world countries. Next problem is on the institutional structures, governance, and corruption. Developed countries have a complex system of institutional structures, of course. No? They have well-developed legal systems that can protect private property and trade transactions. They also have sophisticated financial systems that give opportunities to most citizens to save, borrow, and transfer money. In short, government is relatively efficient in these countries. As to the issue of the level of corruption, there might be some, but this is quite low in developed countries. No? Their economies tend to have established democracies, while developing countries range widely on these issues. Poor developing countries are characterized by weak financial systems, which are often inaccessible to most of the population. And the role of law is also weak, and government is highly corrupt. I guess you can explain that well as to your experiences regarding our own government. While as regard to foreign trade, capital flows, and debt, developing countries vary enormously in their trading relations with other countries. Others might rely heavily on exports of commodities such as oil or coffee, while sometimes exports are not high enough, and there is a foreign currency gap in that we experience in the country. No? Development has been slowed down as the country is unable to import enough to stimulate economic growth. That is it's because some countries have developed manufacturing and service industries. Next is the flow of financial capital also vary between developing countries. Countries such as China have seen large flows of financial inflows which have been invested directly into the industry. As you can observe, Chinese products are proliferating the Philippines, Palawan, and even your own municipality. However, some countries find it difficult to attract foreign direct investment, and some countries have to borrow heavily. And the problem is they are unable to repay the interest and the capital, and that resulted to debt crisis. And that is also true in the case of the Philippines. Okay, so that would be all for this topic class. If you have questions, you can post that to your Google Classroom, or you can include that in our group chat. But for your assignment in this topic, just answer this question: why the Philippines remain a third world country despite its vast natural resources. Explain your answer by citing literature. And you can post your answers in the Google Classroom. Again, this is your professor saying goodbye and thank you for watching.